Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The website clinicaltrials.gov was transformed into a mandatory registry that I created along with Representative Waxman in the 2007 FDA amendments. This website publishes information about the results of clinical trials designed to evaluate medical treatments, but several problematic loopholes exist. For example, a drug company finds out from a clinical trial that a diabetes drug is not only ineffective but also causes severe side effects. As a result, the company abandons the drug's development, never seeks approval with the FDA, and never publishes the results because there is no incentive to do so. Commissioner Hamburg, would the results of this trial ever have to be posted on the clinical trials database?
As I understand it, currently, no. That is an important issue that you raise. I think it could be addressed, but it's not included in.
So if another researcher decided to pursue clinical trials of this same drug, they would have no idea about the dangers identified from the previous trial and would put more people at risk of the same adverse health effects that had already been identified. So generally, do you agree that it would be a good public health measure to ensure that results of all registered trials, regardless if the drug is approved or not, are posted on the database?
I believe that NIH, through its rulemaking process, is currently looking at this question in terms of whether trials for drugs that aren't actually approved could be posted. I think you also raise a broader issue that certainly we are talking about with industry and others in terms of more transparency and the benefits, the common good of making more information available about, not just what works, but what doesn't as well.
Thank you. Now, some clinical trials that occur entirely overseas can be used to support a drug application with the FDA, even though they are not subject to the disclosure requirements of the clinical trials database. Do you agree that any clinical trial, regardless of where it takes place, should be subject to the same transparency requirements if the trial is used as part of the company's approval application to the FDA?
Yes, in general, we certainly agree that more transparency, more information is beneficial, and we think that, this is a bit of a disconnect, and we, would be interested in working with you further.
Now, so this is something Ms. Eshoo and I are working on, this next subject, which is that the FDA data shows that since 2007, 78% of PREA's pediatric study requirements were not completed by their due dates, if at all. These are products that could benefit children, but the studies needed to provide that information are not always being completed. Pediatric studies are especially challenging, and companies may have a perfectly acceptable reason for asking FDA to extend their deadlines. But if the company does not meet its pediatric requirements and fails to provide a reasonable justification, what enforcement options does the FDA have?
Well, we do, as I was discussing with Congresswoman Eshoo earlier, have a limited arsenal of tools, and it really is an area where it's important, number one, to understand the reasons for the delays, and as you note, there's some reasons that are understandable, but these are studies that are important to get done. We need to support companies in getting them done, and there should be expectations and accountability on the completion of those studies.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the FDA's only option for enforcement is misbranding the product, if there's an enforcement action that you can take, but that's an option very rarely, if ever, taken by the FDA. If the FDA were to deem a life-saving treatment misbranded because the company failed to complete its pediatric requirements, children who were being prescribed the drug off-label would lose access to it. Adults would also lose access. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that's why, in some ways, I've heard internally it referred to as the nuclear option.
So either FDA triggers the nuclear option of misbranding, costing everyone access to that drug, or they can do nothing. And that's very different from the way many other violations of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act are handled, which can incur civil monetary penalties. Have civil monetary penalties been effective in other areas to ensure compliance?
I think that they have been, and they do give more flexibility and the ability to target the action to what needs to be done in a more effective way.
Yeah, and I see no reason, Ms. Eshoo and I agree on this, that companies failing to meet their obligations to children should enjoy those special protections. So we'd like to work with you in giving you the flexibility to impose those penalties. And just finally, Ms. Schakowsky and Ms. Baldwin and I introduced a cosmetics bill last Congress. We've reintroduced the same cosmetics bill in this Congress. And as you know, most people believe that the government makes sure that personal care products like shampoo and cosmetics are safe before they're sold. Does the FDA have the statutory authority to require safety testing of cosmetic ingredients before they go on the market?
We do not do pre-market approval for cosmetics except in a very limited domain of color additives.
And can you require a recall of any product in cosmetic? Or?
If there were serious safety issues raised with public health consequences, we would work with the company to get them to voluntarily.
But it's voluntarily.
Yeah.
You don't have a mandatory power. So Ms. Schakowsky and Ms. Baldwin and I are very interested again in pursuing that legislation and working with Mr. Pallone and working with the chairman towards the goal of finding a way of giving you the authority that you need to work on these issues. So if you'd be willing to work with us, we're willing to work with you and with Mr. Pallone and others to see if we can do something legislatively in this area. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Terrific. Thank you.
Cheers.